Okay, hello and welcome to another ComfyUI tutorial. While I'm calling it a tutorial, I'm more teaching you a certain way of using ComfyUI rather than a specific process. I'm going to teach you kind of like a set of kind of things you can do and kind of the ways you can set ComfyUI up in order to get certain things done. The things you're getting done are not your typical ComfyUI setups. Normally it's you click go and it makes a whole advanced process, and there's automatic stuff, and you don't have to do anything, you just click go. However, that's not generally how a lot of artists make stuff. A lot of artists will make stuff over time. They'll come back, they'll rerun the same image again and again. They might use external editors, masking, all kinds of stuff. And because of that, these things are generally, the workflows they use are generally like a bespoke thing. It's like a one-off thing. And ComfyUI can do these things, but it's not built specifically for that. Which means that you kind of have to muddle your own way through and find something that works each time you want to make an image. So what I'm going to do is just show you kind of some of the practices you can basically put into use. And in order to do that, I'm going to do a long video. It's going to probably, I'm just going to build a workflow from scratch to do a thing, and in the process I'm going to explain some of the things I do, and we'll see if we come out with a better image at the end or a bad image. Hopefully it's a better image than we start with, and my cat has decided that it is time to become one with my lap, I guess. Ugh, hello. Look down and at a kitty one. Okay, so in order to do that we need to build a workflow. And yes, you're going to sit on my keyboard arm. Thank you very much. So I'm going to be back in a moment having built a basic system, and I'm going to include this basic system with the tutorial in the description. So bear with me. Okay, I have now finished setting up the workflow. Turn this. So basically, let's run through it, shall we? I may have shown you a sped up version of me building this, but I may as well show you anyway. So we've got a resolution thingo here, which is where we define the resolution of the starting image, which is 640 by 360, and that's because we are running a 1.5 based model, which means it's better at low resolutions for initial image. And we have a K-sampler over here, which we have used to produce the initial image. It's currently not plugged in, but normally it would be the first time you run this. This is to get an initial image. So we're running the K-sampler, we're running it through a latent upscale to give it more detail and size, because we don't really care what it looks like after the first image, which gives us the composition of the shot. You can see there's a big difference between the two, but it's roughly the composition we wanted. And it produced a dragon on a pile of gold. However, there are some problems. There is gold up top instead of cave. There's a mound of gold weirdly placed above it, and I have some concerns with the background here, but I'm just going to go with it. I feel like it should just be in a cave, but if you want to put the entrance in, that's fine. And these coins are ginormous for this dragon, and we need to fix that too. So in order to, I'm going to unplug this because I don't want to run this every time. This is just for generating an initial image, because I needed one. You could issue having this if you already have an image from another workflow or something. Yeah, you could just put it in as well. Now I've added laboriously added a bus, which you may or may not use. There's options where you don't have to just run all the different lines. You can use Impact Packs pipe for that. I just want to be able to break it out wherever I need it. I've set up the prompts, positive and negative, with text. And the initial prompt is, a photo of a dragon sitting on a mound of gold, and I'm emphasizing the mound of gold. In order to do that, you can hold down Control and just press up or down, and it will change the value of the area that you have selected, which is good if it's having trouble making a thing in the prompt. It's dramatic, adding the word fantasy creatures because this tends to help with dragons. In a giant cave, I put Dusty in there because I want some of the features you get with Dusty is the floor tends to have a bit more a little bit of rubble and a bit of smoothness, I guess, to it. Brown rock because I don't want it just making random colors. I want ancient treasures because I don't just want there to be gold, but obviously it hasn't necessarily worked that way. I've got filigree gold, which is where this stuff is coming from, I think, which is fine. I'm just adding words to try and put some treasure in, basically. And mounds of coins and chests, obviously. I've got some quality stuff here, so it's UHD 8K ultra detailed by Caravaggio by Ridley Scott. And these things, you could swap them out and use whatever you want to. Obviously I've told it to make a photo, it's not making a photo. I don't have painting in negative or anything like that. I've got render in 3D because it tends to fix some issues with certain situations, but generally speaking it's just it's a very basic negative prompt. So anyway, so we have created that image and I have saved this image out, and it is in a folder on my desktop. If I can find it, here we go. I've saved it out here as just by itself. I just right-click save from a preview. Nothing fancy there. And if we run new, now what we have is down here. We have an area which is devoted to importing and working on the image, refining the output essentially. And I've kind of pre-made a thing. I'm going to redo it so you can watch. So first off, we've got a load image, which I'm just going to set to load the normal one. And I am going to only use the normal one over here because we can show the other stuff in a minute. And I'm going to unplug this. I do not. Oh, I can just use. Why don't we just use that? Eh? Oh no, it may fail. Let's see. Alright, Control M to mute them instead. Alright, yes, so I can just run this in theory. If it works. Run please, do not throw errors. Okay. I'll just run this at a thingo. And I'm gonna yeah. I just spent like 20 minutes sorting this thing out so that I could show you how to do these things. So I have to kind of go back to where I was at before I actually made it all work. Okay. So in order to build a refining kind of section to your workflow, you're going to want to base it around a sampler or a set of samplers. You'll probably want an upscale thing after this point, something to make your final image. It could be in line with this, or you could just have it separate, kind of like how I have this one separate, and you just load an image. Now, if I just run this, I can refine the thing a little bit. Just every time it'll come up with, put this on the next seed and just run it again. It'll change it a little bit, and you know, it's not going to do much. You could rerun the image like 20 times at like 0.5 and come up with semi-decent results, but it's not going to fix all your problems. There's always going to be some underlying issue if you are just loading an image to run through this. But we can do better, and we can do that by masking, which is basically where most of the art from Stable Diffusion is done. So you want to use, you could use automated processes for this. You could use manually painting it in, right click on this thing, open the mask editor and do all that stuff. Now, while I could show you that process, I've shown you that in another video, several other videos. So I'm not going to use that process here. I'm going to use an external process in order to mask this. Because an external process has some things that we can do that ComfyUI can't do currently. And that's because ComfyUI's masking editor is limited, to say the least. You can only change the size of the area you want to mask. You can't change its transparency. You can't change its blurriness. You can't change colors. It's not as fully featured as some are. And as a result, an external editor is kind of a necessary step. I'm going to close that. And in order to mask and do stuff to this, and actually make use of masks, you can see I've got a load image as mask here. And we're going to make an image that works through this. In order to do that, we need to use an external editor. You could use Photoshop. You could use this one, which is called GIMP, which is a free editing software package. Can't remember what the GIMP stands for. General Image Manipulation Program or something like that. Anyway, it's free, came out on Linux originally. It's not exactly the same as Photoshop. But it has many, it kind of has parity in a way. It has the same kind of tools available. There's a few tutorials. It's not as commonly used, but if you don't have licenses for things, you don't have money, you just want to get things done, this is free. And it is much better than Paint. You could do these things in Paint too. But the advantage of using, say, GIMP or Photoshop is you have access to layers, which lets you do everything in one image. So you don't have to save out multiple images. Well, you do, but you don't have to work within those. You can go back and edit them really easily. So let's start by, this is our original image and we want to change it. So I'm going to delete these old layers that I made. I'm going to add a new layer and I'm going to make sure that it is transparent on the background, which gives us a just invisible layer over the top of it. And I'm going to add a second one because I know I'm going to need a second one. And the top one, I am going to fill it with black. And that's because when you mask a thing, it's generally a black and white image or a black and grays image, it's like a grayscale image. And the level of white defines how much influence is being used. So it's kind of like, think of it as black being 0 and white being 100%. And this is the amount that this image says these areas need to be selected, essentially, for SD or for other editing softwares or other programs. I mean, it's a very common thing to use masking. Now, if we have this as black, it means everything will be transparent and nothing will be masked. So we need to change that. And you could make another image with transparency and do but I'm just going to do this in the one image, and I'm going to change the transparency of the top layer so I can see what's underneath it, which lets me relatively easily pull out the paint tool, change the size, and start painting areas that I don't want. I'm just going to change some things about it. Sure that we're using brushed. If you use the pencil tool, it'll just have hard edges. So if you want hard edges for things, use the pencil tool. Paint will allow you to use the blurriness around the edges, which is what I want. I'm going to bring this up to that a little bit. Yeah, that gives us a better brush to work with. Okay. So the blurry edges around this are going to be less selected than the areas which are pure white here. We run this. So we can select the areas that we want to change, and I would advise, if you're doing this, to only select one set of changes at a time. If you want to fix the gold pile, you don't select it at the same time you're trying to fix the roof of the cave. Trying to fix the dragon's face, you don't fix it in the same process as you fix other sections of it. And that's because it's easier to work on these bits individually than it is to try and get everything right in one go. So treat it more of a step-by-step process with several passes than as a kind of I can fix everything if I just mask out all the bad stuff in one go, because that's not going to work. Well, you'd be very lucky if it worked. Okay, so now we have this area selected. I'm just going to make this. Yeah, okay. So because the level of white changes the influence, it's going to have a pretty hard edge when we run this through a second pass. If you've ever used Inpainting, you know that often hard edges do occur, and we can kind of fix that a little bit by changing the, in this instance it's force, in Photoshop it would be opacity of the brush, and we can blur it even more. If we bring this way down, we can create areas which are much less selected around the edges, and this allows us to say, I want this area to be changed less, which gets rid of some of the hard edge problem. It introduces other problems of its own, especially when you're using things like the V Inpainting and other kind of setups. So really you want to do this depending on how you intend to make use of the masking, essentially. So I've created this image, and this is now black and white, and if we run this 100%, it's now a masked image. So if we now can export this, Photoshop, you'd be doing save as. In GIMP, you want to use export as, because then you can save out the PNG file instead of a random different file type. So we use mask2 and export. Now I've created the mask, and we may as well go ahead and make another set of changes to this, because if we run that mask just by itself, it's not going to 100% work, and I'll show you that in a minute. But we may as well get set up for the next step. And in order to do this, I'm going to need to use the eyedropper tool, and we'll use this to select an area from the background, and this allows us to choose some of the color from this spot here, and then we can paint over this gold, which we don't want. Now I'm going to change the force up again. Okay. Now obviously if we just do all one solid color, it's going to have some issues, and that is it will give anything that you try to mask less detail. And this is an issue that you have to overcome manually. So you'll want to make sure that any area that you're painting in this way has variations of color similar to the rest of the background. Now in Photoshop, I would typically select this area and I would use the generative fill type methods, and then you just say, okay, I don't want to use any of this stuff I don't want, and it will just heal thing over the thing. And I don't necessarily know how or if GIMP has that capability, because I rarely use GIMP, but I will show you the cheap and nasty way in case you happen to have an editor which doesn't have access to all of the latest tricks anyway. But if you have access to those, you'll probably know how to use generative fill or heal fill or whatever it's called these days. Now I am going to use another color from the background, probably a different one. I mean, it's averaging it. Kind of iffy. All right. And I'll make the brush smaller. Now the thing that you are doing stuff to doesn't have to be massively detailed with this process, and hopefully you can see the difference in those colors. I am basically just giving it some more pixels and color types to make use of in the process of diffusing. So it needs to have colors essentially in order to actually make use of this background in the best way possible, so that it merges as much as possible with what we're doing. And I might add, I need a lighter color as well. So let's use eyedropper again and try and get something. Yeah, that's a little better. That's a little bit kind of the same as before. It's fine, it's fine. Now if you do this process, you may draw outside the lines. Just make sure you mask over any areas where you're going to have those lines have gone over the edges or whatever. I'm just going to use the current setup, I think, and we'll export this out as an image. So export as, and I'm going to do 2 export. All right, so we have now created what I would call a essentially we've created the seed for diffusion to work with, and we've also created a mask. So I'm just going to load up the mask. which was 2. And I'm going to now load the different image, the modified image that we had, which is this one. Good. Okay. You might be thinking, oh, if you do it on that, it's going to be bad, but not necessarily. And I need to make sure that if I'm going to do any of these things, I need to make sure this is passed through the vein code with masking intact. So we're going to use set latent mask. Now this method can be iffy when you're using colors like this, because it's better when it's used on something that is already a proper image behind it. So it can have some limited kind of, it's a little bit more limited in some ways than using vein code for inpainting or using other things. And it has a tendency to want to return to the original image for one reason. And that is because we have still got the original conditioning applied. Okay, so you'll notice I've changed it. I've influenced the background enough that it should make cave above it, but clearly it is not doing that. It may do it occasionally. If I run this again and again and again, it may do it. But if we run like it with a second prompt instead, I'm going to feed this second prompt over here, which only affects the things run through this process. And all I'm doing is I'm putting in this masked area positive prompt is stuff designed to influence just this masked area. It doesn't influence the rest of the image. It's just for this one part. So if you run this, it's not going to change anything but that one selected area. So if I run this again, hopefully I don't prove myself wrong with a bad generation, but you never know. There you go, it's not making terrible image. So clearly it fails to understand that we're in a cave, not outside, but that's fine, that's fine. And if you want to make sure that it doesn't necessarily do that, you can use this negative prompting here as well. And you can feed in the negative prompt, hang on, over here. And hopefully it will get rid of the sky, if we're lucky. No, it doesn't want to do that. The over here there must be just a little bit too much blue in the background image. So there's something here which says this needs to be blue. That's probably coming from the seed, because this is imparting noise through this, and this kind of section of the noise that it's adding to this process probably has some blue pixels or something in there which is helping it to feed that feeling that there should be sky there. So even with this stuff and this stuff, it can still go wrong. If I just tick this once to the next seed, it could fix it. It might have sky elsewhere, we'll see. So as you can see, the noise it's produced is not outputting sky in this section now. So yeah, just make sure that if you're running these things, remember that if you're using any kind of latent noise, there's a chance that the stuff it creates from that is going to be different colors than you might expect. And I could change that also by using certain levels of this. If I get this to 4:3, it's probably going to use more of the background changes that I made, which means it's going to make some kind of odd choices, because this is not as detailed as the rest of the image. So these are kind of blurry a little bit, the colors kind of muddy, and so on. When we go over here, we see these are now out of focus. There's kind of a weird edge going on over here, but you know, it can kind of work. And certainly you could run this through once and then run through again and then run through again to make the cave look better. But you can also use other methods to do the same process. That's just set latent noise mask. We could use a different one. We could use the Vey encode for inpainting. Now bear in mind, I'm just using the Vision, was it Realistic Vision B51 standard model. You could use Inpainting for this. There's an Inpainting model which has some benefits. There's some disadvantages to it as well. Really needs a whole nother video just for Inpainting models. But generally, Inpainting models cause less changes at higher denoise values, which makes them a little bit better at certain kind of things for Inpainting, but not necessarily for everything. So it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish and how much you've experimented with and learned it. So as you'll notice, I've just run it with Vey encode for Inpainting. Run it once, and it's at 0.4 denoising, which means it's going to be using that blank space that Vey encode generally makes when you put masks on. So make sure if you're running Vey encode, you want to be at high denoise, preferably 1. And this should make a much better image this time. And as always, you know, these you can run this as many times as you want to get the images you want, and you can see it's done a pretty good job. No major issues. There's some, if you zoom right in, you can see there's some issues here, and we fix that in later processes by rerunning this again and again a couple of times. We might run a sampler of the whole image as well in order to like unify any kind of weirdness between sections where you've done any masking. So now down here is a alternate method which is using the detailer from Impact Pack. So Impact Pack is a series of nodes which are pretty complex. If I open up this, open up Impact Pack, you'll see there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of things, and they all plug into each other in weird ways, and they can be really hard to learn. I would suggest that you check out the GitHub page if you have any problems with those. The author of that has made a bunch of tutorials on how to wire up certain systems, which are pretty useful. But generally speaking, it has some great functionalities that the basic nodes don't have, which is why I'm using it here. And the cool thing about Detailer is that it, generally speaking, can do sections of your workflow at higher resolution. So if you set this up to do like a small area like a face, and you run through Detailer, it can bring more resolution to that section of your image than would normally be in your image, essentially. But there's all kinds of other cool stuff. You can really tweak the settings a whole bunch. So I'm going to run this through. It's just using the same mask, and it's using the same this image and this image to work. They're just plugging in. It's using a mask to segs, so I'm not using anything special into the segs thing. If you drag this out, hang on, and try and plug in stuff, you'll find segs and mask, and then you'll be like, hang on, it plugs in segs again, and why is it doing these things, right? That's because a lot of the Impact Pack you drag out, it doesn't give you the best thing possible in the suggested nodes list. So it's a good idea to really open it up and actually have a look at the section that you're working with, utility or whatever, to really kind of find the right nodes for it. So I'm running a mask to segs, which is basically the same as what Vey encode is doing. It's using a mask to select an area of the image. You're just translating it into a different kind of data using a certain system, essentially. So if we run it, it's going to render both, I think, but if we run it, it is doing the same thing as you can see in this section here. And it should output us Yeah, see, it's doing the same kind of thing as the other one above. Yeah, that's kind of how I would fix the top of the image. It's like you do the same process to fix the gold here. You could go, okay, well, I've done this particular process, so, well, you know, I need to fix the next part. So instead you go, just make sure you save out the one you really want to work with. So I'm going to save out this one, and where is it? Save image. I'm just, yeah, gonna rename it. Good, we're good, we're fine. And I'm gonna open it up in here. Open this image, which gives us our modified image. Do the same thing as before. Now you could just import this into an existing image so that you don't have to make all these layers again if you want. You know, whatever. So this, and then we run this. Change the opacity. Same process as last time. I mean, this time I'm not really going to bother with the background image, I don't think. I'm just going to keep it there. And this, yes. And we should have what we need, okay. And that needs to be a lot bigger. Yeah. So I want this to be a lot smaller gold pieces. I might actually, I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to reduce the size of this. A little bit around this one. Give it a little bit more in terms of different sized objects. Now you can go around the clawed toes or whatever, it's not hugely necessary. It will re-render the claws if you select them. But what it is going to do is it is going to try and use a little bit of whatever is underneath, speaking, if we have set this up properly. Okay, that. And I'm going to save it out. Export. All right, that gives us another mask to work with, and I'm just going to load it in. Now we're just selecting the gold pile, and because we're changing this, if I just leave this as is, it's going to make a mound of rock probably. So pile. Pile of treasures. Gold coin. Stacks. If we are lucky. I can't use this one. Probably. I'll just run it as is and we'll just see what it does. Okay, it has made the coins much bigger. That is not what I told you to do. Okay, I mean they're more defined, but now my dragon is very small. And oops, I have left this on, so I'm just gonna choose the correct. Yeah, it's the right image there. Ignore this bit. All right, and it's done the same thing for both because generally speaking, these two processes don't change a huge amount. So they got the same seed or something. No, but they're still doing the same thing because I have defined that they not defined a size, and I've kept this very generic. So the things that apply normally to SD image generation also apply, but only in the masked area. So if you want to make an image like a smaller thing, you have to you have to describe it less. We'll usually make a thing smaller in an image. If you describe a thing more, we'll make it bigger in an image and add more detail. So I probably need more detail here in order to make the the coins themselves smaller. So if we go add some detail words, golden amounts of treasure, small stacks of coins. Yeah, why not? Describing it more, it should. In theory, it isn't necessarily going to do what I'm telling it to do. It might decide that it's still... Yeah. So, it's trying to make a tiny dragon. No matter what I do today. But anyway, so as you can see, because I don't really want to spend 9 hours trying to refine this image, yeah, this is the process you would use to do this kind of thing. Okay, tutorial ended a little bit early because of my poor decision-making skills going into it. I'm going to turn this into a 2-parter, and the second part is going to be on compositing and editing in a third-party program, and then bring it in. There is a compositing tutorial already, which you could probably use. If you've used Photoshop, whatever, you can just put stuff in and do it pretty easily. Same process already shown in this. Not hard, but I'm going to do a tutorial on it anyway. And yeah, so there's a shortcut to the workflow in the description. There is a shortcut to GIMP as well, and chapters will allow you to skip things if you want to skip things. Probably should put that like up the front of the video. Maybe I will. Maybe I will. Anyway, thanks for watching. Busy lately. Will be more tutorials, but might take a little bit longer because yeah, super busy.